Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. This is Zip. How is everyone doing out there? Especially after the markets this weekend. Hopefully your nerves are intact, you are non-emotional, and you took advantage and you bought the dip. I know I was scooping up more of the assets that I love, and that's what the smart money is doing, and we're going to get into that tonight and look at a couple reports. We're going to talk about some XRP news, but really the theme tonight is the overall crypto environment and what is going on and what the institutions are doing, regardless of political outfalls and wars and conversations that are going on out there that may, cause the markets to tumble, as we saw this week. XRP, I think, got down to 194. Perfect opportunity to buy it. And I know I was buying this weekend. And again, that's what the smart money is doing, because we have a macro view. We are looking long term where this asset class is going. And tonight I'm going to build that theme even more. But the markets are right back up. XRP at 215, Bitcoin's back up to $105,000. And there's nothing saying that the markets won't dip again. And every dip is an opportunity just to stack your bags more. If you're brand new to this environment, yep, it's a wild ride. It's thrilling. It's exciting. It's emotional. But that's where you have to separate yourselves and the emotions in this investment asset class. Nothing I say is financial advice, of course, but if you can continue to stack at these low prices with some of the utility cryptos that I love to speak to, like XRP, XLM, HBAR, XDC, SHX, these utility cryptos are the future of finance, and the system is being changed right before our eyes. And we just have to block out the distractions and the negative noise and keep the course. Before we get into the news, I want to again mention out there to keep the conversation going in a safe and secure way. I've gone out and I've created a collaborative environment so that we can all just communicate. I can answer your questions out there. I'll be in the rooms, but we can have an environment where we can discuss more than you just watching these videos in a safe and collaborative way. It's absolutely free. As I put out the video yesterday, I'm using TextRP as collaborative environment on the XRPL. So you actually get to see some utility being used with many of you that own XRP. But again, the link is in the description. Come out here and continue the conversation, and I'll answer questions. And I'm sure we'll have other smart, like-minded folks that resonate together that can answer your question as well as we travel in this journey together. Now, getting into the news, one thing I'd like to mention, it looks like, this weekend, it appeared we were going into wide-scale war if you paid attention to a lot of the news outlets, which I generally don't. But it appears that calmer heads may be prevailing. It looks like we're going to have a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, but we'll see what happens. And that is why the markets this weekend, as the U.S. bombed Iran, the markets plummeted. Crypto's 24/7, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. But we saw the reaction in the crypto markets. But again, it gave us an opportunity to purchase more. If you have high confidence and belief, and by the end of this video, I think you will, even more so, you're going to continue to stack these if you have the availability. And that's what we talk about on this channel, different ways to possibly build up your crypto portfolio. I am diversified across the board, and I'm not a maxi in anything. I am here, the same reason that you're here and watching these videos, to make money. That's the bottom line. But I'm trying to provide some of this content to keep you, one, engaged and give you the broad stroke of what is happening so you can see it and maintain that confidence. And if you have the powder, go out and buy more. Absolutely. Now, I want to take a listen to this that came out of the XRP Vegas conference. And this is the Terra Premium ETF CEO talking about XRP. And looking at actually analyzing price targets and how they do this. But let's take a listen to what he has to say, and then we'll have a quick discussion on it.
And the questions we get from investors is, when's the price going to go up? That's what everybody wants to know. Yeah. Well, the only way that we can figure that out, we have a 22-page paper that's not public yet. I got to figure out how to do that our analyst did. And he went over all the legitimate pricing models for XRP. And again, it came to between $5 and $4,300, depending on your timing and your use case. For me, it's supply, demand, and velocity. So if it takes 5 seconds to settle a transaction, how many XRP did that use? Can you really do it 12 times a minute? Can you really do that 24 hours a day? So how much XRP do you really need? Those are all basic.
Supply, demand, and velocity. We talk all the time about the velocity of money. Money is always looking for somewhere to go, and it's going to go to the path of least resistance. And as I talk about in the system and in my financial system that I am deploying and have implemented, it's about that velocity of money. I don't want my money sitting around in the bank. All right. And it's the same thing for these crypto assets. They are high utility, especially XRP. You heard him, making price targets anywhere from $5 to $4,300. Wherever it goes, it's going to go. But I know it's going up. And that's why you have to have a concrete system and a plan for when you decide to exit capital out of these markets. Because even when you exit it, putting it into just a bank account is not going to do any good long term. You've got to continue to create that velocity and movement of money, as I've been speaking to in many of my videos. And we'll continue to hammer on that plan and that execution and the strategies. And that's what that collaborative environment and that chat server environment is for. So we can kind of talk through things and execute our plans and have a vision for the future. But exciting to see that. And things are still moving, ladies and gentlemen. We have here, another blockchain, the Everything blockchain, plans a 10 million strategic acquisition of Solana, XRP, SUI, Tau, and Hype. Front running Wall Street. We're seeing, remember, the theme tonight, big picture, broad stroke of what is going on, but we're seeing that flywheel effect take speed, and companies all around the world are buying into crypto and building strategic treasuries. They're not doing that because they believe that crypto is a nothing burger. They're doing that because they understand, as wealth advisors, as wealthy individuals and institutions, they see what is happening here, and they are getting behind crypto in a huge way. And when this regulation is established, it's going to fire off like a rocket ship. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. Now, Vivo Power, we've been talking about them, and here they are again. They've completed their first phase of the $60.5 million investment into, with XRP into their trust or strategic strategy that they're doing, their reserve strategy. And remember, they're also going to then be taking that XRP and they're going to be in a contract with Flare and using it in Flare, which I'll be dropping more content on that. Some other information came on. Why? Because they're keeping that velocity up and they're using their XRP to build more XRP and leverage passive income. That is what it's about, but more news from them. So we're seeing continuous movement out here. Now, we're going to break down at this point. We know digital assets. Look, ladies and gentlemen, they're no longer really a niche play. Okay. If you have been in the market since, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, even up to a couple years ago, we weren't sure where this market was going, but many of us had the faith and the high confidence, and we saw the vision, and we believed that it would get to the point that it is today, where all the countries around all the world are investing in these assets because they see the big picture. It is becoming a core part of high value wealth investors' portfolios, and the institutions are jumping in and supplying that demand for the wealthy. Now we're going to look again at this fresh data from EY, and we also have a Morningstar paper here that we're going to look at that really is showing why high net worth investors are bullish on crypto and how this asset class is growing at an explosive rate, and why you and I, the retail investors, would be smart to pay attention to this and stay the course no matter what happens in the markets. If it goes down 20%, we don't flinch. We're here for the long term, but let's break it down and see what they had to say inside here. And we're going to build a theme of what have I been saying for the last several months: regulations, regulations, regulations. But now let's talk about the big players and what they're doing here. According to this survey in 2025, institutional investors, 86% of them are, think hedge funds, family offices, firms managing over $1 billion are either already invested in digital assets or plan this year to jump in. And we can see that analysis right here. All right. And they're basically going out and asking these high net worth investors, what do they think about the digital asset environment? This is a massive vote for confidence. And even more telling, as we can see, 67% of these institutions plan to increase their crypto holdings in 2025. 16% are eyeing a significant boost. That's a lot of liquidity that's coming into the market. And we also see 59% are planning to allocate more than 5% of their portfolios to crypto. This is not pocket change we're talking about. We're talking about high net worth individuals. And these are serious bets on the future. Now, in this question here, they ask, which of the following do you consider to be the main reasons to invest in digital assets? Why? Higher returns than other asset classes. All right. Here, it's a hedge against inflation. We talk about inflation all the time. That's another reason why I don't want my money sitting in a bank account. I want to make sure that it is deployed in making me more money, and it's in high yield assets. Yes, crypto is very, very risky. However, the reward is worth it, in my opinion. And yield generation, staking, stable coins, that's Flare. We see what's going on with Flare and the ability to participate in decentralized finance, DeFi. That's what the wealthy are thinking about. And that's what we also need to be thinking about. So again, almost 80% of the respondents expect cryptocurrency prices to rise, and nearly 70% see crypto as the biggest opportunity to generate attractive risk-adjusted returns. This isn't just a content creator telling you this. This is research of high net worth value and institutions out there in the market that are putting billions and billions and billions of dollars into these crypto assets like XRP, like XLM, HBAR, all these utility grade cryptos, to include Bitcoin. Absolutely. Now, let's just zoom in and focus specifically on the wealthy, okay? And think about what they are doing. As we can see here in the respondents, 57%, what do you think will be the next catalyst for growth of the digital assets industry? 57%, regulatory clarity. That's what we've been talking about for months. We need the regulations to establish the foundation so that all of this takes off. And that's why I am still shooting for Q4 of this year. By Q4, we're looking at October of this year. This thing is going to take off. All right. We should have regulations in place that we know we've been talking about that should be on the president's desk. He wants them there by August. They're pushing those bills through. We're waiting on the House right now to get out of gear and make it happen. But we've got the ETFs that are going to be approved for many of these blockchains, XRP, HBAR, Solana, and we also then are waiting on the SEC case. All of this thing together is just one big explosion that's going to happen later on this year, in my opinion. You can see here, 31% are looking for additional ETP or ETF approvals. Why? Because institutional value can come in easier in that environment. You know, obviously, challenges remain, with top concerns being what? Regulation uncertainty. Yep, volatility is going to be there. And the security asset custody. That's why we're seeing Ripple custody as an example, onboarding and providing that custody solution for high net worth individuals. But regulation is the key, ladies and gentlemen. And we go over to this article here, Morningstar zooms in, and we're talking about wealthy investors again that want digital assets advice. But what's the problem? Many question the advisors. Why? Because the advisors have been sitting on the sidelines for years when you and I, many of us, have been front running this environment. This is the greatest time to be alive and the greatest opportunity to create wealth, generational wealth in many instances, if you set your system and your exit strategy up correctly for our families. You know, in this published article that came out, they polled basically 500 net worth investors, and they, you know, asked them various questions, but the results were 89% of those investors that are already holding crypto, what is their plan? Their plan is to increase their exposure in 2025. And that's what we see happening. Nearly 9 out of 10 wealthy investors are doubling down. And it's not just about owning Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the big name out there. And yes, Bitcoin will be around. And I have nothing against buying Bitcoin, but from a return on value, my opinion, you're better off being in the next generation of the future of finance, which is XRP, XLM, HBAR, all the ones I talk about. All right. I'm not bought in on any specific chain, but they're showing, what this is showing us is they're approaching this strategically. They're not speculating, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a speculative class anymore. A decision has been made. And now, where do the retail investors like you and I come in? The wealthy and the institutions, they have the resources to spot trends early, and they're signaling that digital assets are a must-have. I don't need any other. All I have to do is watch the wealthy, and I'm going to follow what the big money is doing, and I'm going to stack my pennies against their dollars every time. But, you know, there's also a gap there. It says that 82% of wealthy investors want crypto advice from their financial advisors, as I was speaking to. But many of them, they worry because the advisors lack expertise to really understand this environment. Now, this is telling me two things. First, the demand for crypto is so strong that even traditional wealth managers now are what? They're scrambling to try to catch up. Things that you and I have known for years and years by watching content creators, by studying, by doing our own research. We are ahead of the curve, and we beat these high net worth investors to the market. Second, tells me retail investors can absolutely get ahead by what? Continuing to educate ourselves and acting now. Now is the time to act rather than waiting for mainstream advisors to tell us what to do, which is the case many times that we have done. We are here. Look, investors are bullish. And again, the trust is the issue, though, because of the lack of expertise out there in the financial market. Investors absolutely have a yearning for more basic knowledge. All right. But regulated products are the preferred gateway. Again, the regulations open up a new door, open up a wave of institutional value that are going to come into these markets. And it's going to be something that we have never experienced or seen. We've been in bull runs before, many of us, many of you that are listening to this video, but we have not been in an environment to where everything foundationally was regulated and they knew exactly what keys needed to be used to unlock the doors. Now, are we too late to the party? Many of you may be new to this environment, and I hope you are new. The answer to that is no. We are so early. These reports emphasize that we are really, really early in this asset class's life cycle. Crypto's total market cap is growing. We're seeing that, but it's still a fraction of the traditional markets, like equities and bonds. This flywheel is just starting to spin faster, and regulation, I'm telling you, is here to supercharge it. So what's the takeaway for us, for you, the retail investor, the brand new person watching this video, trying to figure out what needs to be done? Follow the smart money, but do it with discipline. Do it with positive mindset. Do it loaded with knowledge. I'm trying to provide as much knowledge as possible. Part of that environment, that's why the chat server's out there. It's literally free. All you have to do is have an Xaman wallet to join it. And you're out there and we can communicate and help each other build wealth for the future. The wealthy institutions, they're not YOLOing into this crypto thing. They're allocating strategically. We're seeing that with the reserves from large companies. They're diversifying across assets. They're not bought into just one asset, and they're going to be using regulated vehicles like ETFs, and we will too, and should. Build that long-term plan is the key, and stick to it, and don't get shaken out by short-term volatility like we saw this past weekend. I hope no one sold their positions. And if you did, I hope you did it strategically and you sold and then you bought back in at a lower price. But I'm a buy and hold. That is my theme. And when the markets dip, I buy more and I continue to stack as much as I possibly can before it gets to a point to where investors, retail investors, can't afford it. Think about it. XRP's back up above $2 again. For those of us that were here back when it was 20 cents, we could buy 5 XRP for $1, where you're getting 1 for $2 now. That is starting to eliminate the amount of individuals that can really buy in significantly into these markets. So we're at a pivotal moment, and this data that we went over this evening is showing institutions are driving unprecedented growth in digital assets. I mean, it's a fact at this point, creating a self-reinforcing cycle that's only going to get stronger. So I hope you got something out of this. I hope it builds confidence. I hope you see the macro picture out of what is going on, not just with me just speaking words, showing you reports, showing you actual data, showing you companies actually implementing crypto investments within their portfolios. It's here, ladies and gentlemen. It's time. Get on the train before it absolutely is speeding too fast for you to get onto it, and have a confidence, hold smart, stay away from the scammers, be confident in your position, and build that long-term strategy of what you're going to do when these markets really explode. Keynote here, I want to mention, if you've been hanging on to the end, which I hope you are, if any of you tried to get on the exchanges this weekend, you might have noticed it was a little hard to execute your trades. Uphold was locked up. Binance was locked up. Why? Because everybody was trying to get in. Why I use Caleb and Brown. I had absolutely no problem executing the trades that I wanted to do. So again, just a note, look at Caleb and Brown, use the link in the description if you want to, or just go out to them. But you want to have alternatives to some of these exchanges, and you have to line all that up now, and we'll be out there in the chats collaborating on that. That's the kind of topics that I like to have. Please drop any comments in the YouTube here that you would like. Be safe, be smart. Until next time, Zip is out.